Hello everybody, welcome back. In this class, I'm going to discuss about servlet config. An object of servlet config is created by the web container for each servlet. And this object can be used to get information, configuration information from web.xml file. If the configuration information is modified from the web.xml file, we don't need to change the servlet. So it is easier to manage the web application if any specific content is modified from time to time. The core advantage of servlet config is that you don't need to edit the servlet file if information is modified from the web.xml file. Now I'll explain you in detail. Servlet config interface is an interface given in Java X.Servlet package and its implementation class is provided by the vendor. A web container creates servlet config object just before calling the init method, that is lifecycle method of a servlet. The web container creates the servlet config object and then calls the init method by passing the servlet config object as a parameter to it. The servlet config object is created by the container in the middle of constructor execution and lifecycle init method execution. So, what did you understood about this? First, the web container creates the servlet object, then calls the default constructor, then constructor creates the servlet config object, and servlet config object calls the init method or the lifecycle method. For each servlet, the web container creates its own servlet config object. Servlet config object, the web container stores three types of information into the servlet config object. What does the web container store into servlet config object? It stores the logical name of servlet, init parameters of servlet, servlet context object reference. The web container reads the logical name of servlet and init parameters of servlet in the deployment descriptor file, that is web.xml. In web.xml, we provide the logical name or dummy name for each servlet. If required, we can also pass parameters to servlet in web.xml. We call such type of parameters as init parameters. And one parameter is in the form of name value A. For one servlet, we can pass any number of init parameters. If you want to pass init parameters to a servlet in web.xml, we need to use an element called init param inside the servlet tag. And why init parameters are given in a servlet inside a servlet in the web.xml? Because if we create variables directly in a servlet class, then whenever we want to modify those the variable values, then we need to recompile the servlet, reload the servlet, and restart the server. This is a very time consuming process. So instead of this, if we pass the init parameters from web.xml, then whenever it is required, we can modify the parameter values in the web.xml. And it becomes easy to modify the values because we need not recompile, reload, and restart the server. And what is the difference between this constructor and init method? Servlet config object is created after calling the constructor and just before calling the init method. It means servlet object config object is not accessible to the constructor, but it is available to the init method. So in the init method, we can read the data stored in the servlet config object, but in the constructor, it is not possible. And so this is about the servlet config. And what are the methods for reading the servlet config? Container creates servlet config object and stores three types of information. In our servlet class, if we want to read that information, then the following four methods are given in servlet config interface. The first method is getServletName, that is config.getServletName. This method is used for reading the logical name of the servlet config object. This method returns a string. Second method is getInit parameter. Config.getInit parameter. This method is used for reading the value of an init parameter by using its name, that is key. And this method returns the value as always in the form of string. Next method is the getInit parameter names. This method is used for reading all the parameter names at a time. This method returns or stores the names into a collection object called enumeration. That is config.enumeration v equal to config.getInit parameter names. And the last method is getServlet context. That is servlet context ctx equal to config.getServlet context. This method is used for reading the context object reference from the servlet config object. Whenever the deployment takes place, it does not wait for the request. The container reads the web.xml file and creates the servlet context object, one for each application per JVM, which may contain multiple servlets. So this is about the servlet config. Now I'll show the example for this servlet config. So first create a dynamic web project, servlet config. Then inside the source, I'm having one servlet config example. Then in the web content inside web.init, I have web.xml also. So first see the web.xml. Here inside the servlet tag, my servlet name is servlet config example and servlet class is also servlet config example. And we need to create the init parameters inside the servlet tag. That is init param name is driver, param value is the MySQL driver name, that is com.mysql.jdbc.driver. Then end the servlet tab. Then inside servlet mapping, my servlet name is servlet config ex and my URL pattern I have given it as /config. And since there is no index.html here, my default welcome.filelist is index.jsp. So you can directly run the servlet config here. Public class servlet config ex extends HTTP servlet, then public void do get HTTP servlet request comma HTTP servlet response throws servlet exception comma IO exception. Response.set content type text/html. Print writer out equal to response.getWriter. Then servlet config object is created here. Config equal to get servlet config. Then string driver equal to config.getAny parameter. When the servlet asks for config.getInit parameter of driver, then this gets the parameters, init parameters from web.xml. Then out.print driver is this driver. So I'm directly running this servlet class. Select the Tomcat server and the particular project is servlet config. Then say finish. So your driver is com.mysql.jdbc.driver. So this is the servlet config. Hope you understood. So I'll continue in the next class.